Brenden, it is fantastic to have you. Really, really appreciate you sharing some time with me this morning and talking a little bit about your background and how you got into the training on communication. Ironically, it was interesting. I don't know if we talked about this, but I didn't realize that you had been at IBM as well for a little bit. How long were you there for?
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. Pleasure to be on, man. Yeah, I
Okay.
was at IBM for 2.5 years, and before that, I was a VC.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, Brenden, it's fantastic to have you on. I think we have a lot to cover just in terms of like your entrepreneurship journey, kind of how you got there, and then also how you think about communication and improving that, and some tips you might have around that. Um, as you know, IceBrekr is founded on the belief that the life that we're dreaming of is built through the connections that we make. And when we're standing in front of someone who would be a fantastic connection, that's obviously a wonderful thing. Um, the next thing that is important is, are we ready for this connection to take it to the next level? And we're always growing, we're always improving, and there's always folks that we meet that are just milestones or way markers for us that to help us to see where we are and where we want to be. And so life will have them circle back around to us at the time that we're ready. But it's always good to be improving the medium with which we are delivering our services, our products, our message. And so communications obviously is a key part of doing that. And so looking forward to hearing a little bit about your um, perspective on communication and how you got there. So yeah, so let's. I'd love to hear a little bit about the genesis of it. Can you kind of tell me how you got into this communication as an occupation? And it sounded like there was some people that had kind of pointing in that direction. Again, that whole idea that the people that we meet are oftentimes accelerators for where we're going to be in the future, based on encouragement or things that we learn or just connection that they make for us. But yeah, love to hear how you got into the communication.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. So essentially what happened was when I was in university, I used to do these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. It's kind of like hackathons, but for the business world. So while other guys my age were playing sports like rugby or basketball or baseball, I was doing presentations competitively. And that's how I learned how to speak. So I did these competitions. I'm primarily self-taught, did really well at these competitions. And then I started coaching people who were younger than me, mostly for free back then, because they wanted to win in these competitions too. And we didn't really have a speech coach. So I kind of just said, oh, I guess I'm a speech coach. So I started helping them with their communication skills. But what happened, Dave, was as I was getting older, I realized a few things. The first one is that everything that I had in my head wasn't available online for free on the internet. Like advice like we hear right now is like, tell me about yourself, or be yourself, or be authentic and share the true you. And I was like, how does this even make sense? Like, this is not helping people. That's the first hole I saw in the market. The second hole was when I was a venture capitalist in my younger days, even if I'm still young. I was a student VC, and I would help a lot of tech CEOs for like 19, 20 years old. And I realized all of them really good at building product, but not really good at communicating product to someone who didn't understand their stack. And then the other piece was they couldn't afford a coach because they hadn't raised any money yet.
Mhm.
So no one was helping them because obviously coach needs money to help them. So I was like, there's a lot of holes here. So when I started working at IBM, before I started the job there, I actually started Math Stock in my basement just to share free communication tips to help people. And it wasn't even a business back then. I was just making videos. And then as time went on, I was side hustling Math Stock while I was working at IBM. And then eventually I replaced all my income, and I pretty much had to quit or else I was gonna blow up my mind.
That's great. That's great. Who's your favorite client so far? If you could share. I mean, you can share stories if you want to, but versus names. But yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
what things got you up?
Yeah, I would say for me, I mean, my favorite client, most of my clients are executives. Out of my top one, they're executives in tech, but I would say the biggest one are definitely the tech CEOs. And the reason the tech CEOs always give me the most joy is because they get the best results. And the reason they get the best results is because they get a lot more than just knowing how to communicate in a boardroom. It completely changes the way that they communicate about their business to the outside world, especially the really, really technical ones. Like when I sit on a call with them, they're like, this feature. And I'm sitting there and just saying, what actually matters? Like, what do we actually care about here? Why would someone buy
Mhm.
this? So when you ask questions that technical founders don't really think about, it really helps reshape their mind and seeing themselves more in the sales department rather than just the technical department versus all departments. So yeah, I've had a couple of CEO clients. Like one of them is a CEO of like this cool technology with nail polish. So it's like instead of women putting nail polish on, it's like this LED that you put on your nails. That's clips on, like a clip-on nail, and you could change the colors of your nails just with the phone. And there's like thousands of designs you could pick from. It's really fascinating tech. And then
Yeah,
somebody
brilliant.
else, yeah, it's really fascinating. Then somebody else that I just signed last week that I'm working with right now is the CEO of like a pacemaker, not a pacemaker, like a patch. It's like a metal patch that you can put on your heart and it can detect your vital signs 24/7 in the day, and it's used in the pediatrics department of a hospital. So that's really fascinating. They just started the clinical trials, but she didn't really have a good sense on how to communicate that to a non-technical person. So that's been
Hmm.
really fun.
So that's great. What is it about that drives you, like in terms of your energy, like the why around it?
Yeah, for sure, bro. I think the next Elon Musk is a 15-year-old girl in Cambodia. That's mostly my thesis for life. Except the problem with that 15-year-old girl, she doesn't have access to a communication coach. Like, think about it. When Elon Musk was 15 years old, nobody cared about him. Nobody cared about what he was working on. Nobody cared. And I think that's such a shame because if we all banded together as a one humanity and just helped all of the next generation get really, especially the geniuses, like of the people who are actually going to shape society moving
Hmm.
forward, like the Elons. If I had coached him when he was 15, like he wouldn't have any speech impediments or any speech issues. He would just be boom, rocking it. And he's already rocking, obviously, he's the richest guy in the world, but and he's probably the only human being who'll ever create a space rocket and a car and put the car on the space rocket and put it into space. But fair enough. But the point is we need to bet more on the future. And I think what I realized is the only way for me to do this at scale is for me to become the face of that problem. Right. So if people associate communication to me, like Dale Carnegie as an example, it's just Dale didn't have the mediums of technology that we have today. We can use that as a leverage so that not just the Elon Musks in this lifetime, but in every lifetime can keep learning from me forever. That's really my ethos, my reason for being. Because if all 10,000 geniuses, there's probably around 10,000 of them in the world, if all of them communicated really, really well, the whole world would change very drastically.
Wow, that's a big statement. Um, I think there's a bunch of rabbit trails we can go on that one. But yeah, I totally agree with that. That's that's a great vision. Um, how are you? What's your plan for doing that? How are you? Did you have do you have a book?
Not yet, not yet. The goal is to wait for a while before I write it.
Okay, all right, super. Yeah, I love your vision, and I think that's so true. Yeah, somehow we have to uh, kind of go back to, I don't know, do you talk a lot about fallacies and those type of things? Do you kind of talk through uh, logic when you're talking about communication? Because honestly, fallacies are used tremendously for political gain and for, propaganda, population control, and so forth. And they're used in advertising too. But, uh, and people don't even notice it, right? They'll read an ad and be like, "Oh yeah, it's complete fallacy, but it's catchy," right? Do you talk about that? Do you talk about logical fallacies?
Not really. I actually have to research what that is, really, but that makes sense based on your definition. I would say for me, I keep things simple, man, especially in the context of sharing ideas. For me, it's all about one word, and that one word is momentum.
Mhm.
When we have momentum in whatever it is that we're doing, it becomes a lot easier for us to master this. So I'll give you an example. Let's say someone who's looking to master communication is really scared, they're really worried about it. But if I prove to them they can be a great communicator, anything becomes possible. Like the random word exercise. This is an exercise I teach people. Take a random word like mouse, like laptop, like camera, and create presentations out of thin air on the spot. So what happens is once you're able to communicate in that way effectively, you do the exercise the first time, you suck at it. You're like, oh my God, I hate this thing. Why am I doing this? But after you do that exercise 100 times, you're exponentially, I would say, you're exponentially better than the first version. And that gives you a lot of confidence. It gives you a lot of momentum. So that when you look at your life, you go, oh, this is actually really good. I'm actually really solid at this. And then when that happens, like especially tech CEOs, they go like, oh, I can do the random word exercise. I could do anything. And the reason is because this is a quote I have in my clients, is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So if you make sense out of nonsense, like do avocado for 60 seconds. Well, if you're talking about the business that you spend years and years and years developing the product, pitching it to investors, selling the vision to prospective employees and customers, you could easily do that. You could easily pitch what your idea is.
You sound like you could coach some rappers.
I have analogies that I draw with rapping, but
Okay.
definitely not a rapper though.
Okay. That's pretty cool. That's fascinating. That's fascinating. What kind of growth do you see in just self-confidence around, what you're providing in terms of training and stuff?
Yeah, I would say for me, self-confidence is a lot more than just the presentations that we give. Communication, Dave, is every interaction we have with every human being we'll meet in our lives. It's the way that we order coffee at Starbucks. It's the way that we order food at a restaurant. It's the way that we meet strangers when we travel. It's every little micro interaction. So when we realize that communication is about leading a fulfilling life, not just making the next sale, not just giving the next presentation, being on the next podcast, that's what really motivates us to keep going, to keep pushing for more. So that's the one piece that I would share. And then the other piece is, for all of us, that reason is different. That's what's fascinating about communication, is we all want to communicate better for different reasons. The mother wants to communicate better, to have a better relationship with their children. But another mother who's, let's say, in the corporate world wants to communicate better to get their next promotion. Somebody else does it because they want to grow their business, hire more staff. Everyone has their own reasons. And the way that we think about the answer is the following question: how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? How would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? Don't just write that question down. Spend 10 to 15 minutes really thinking about it. Journal it. So once you find an answer to that question, that really pushes you out of your comfort zone and really makes you realize that, oh, wait a second, there's a clear motivation here for me to master communication. So let me just go ahead and do that.
How many facets are there of communication, though? I mean, you have the verbal, right? The grammar and the vocabulary, right? The tics where you're saying whatever, which I'm comfortable with doing. But then you have the presentation part, which is the eye contact or the posture or the inflection, right? Some of that has to come with personality or, again, confidence, right? There's so many facets of communication. I would think that there's probably people who think, I can get a thought across just fine and communicate what I'm trying to say with the right vocabulary and clearly where they understand it. Do I really need communication training? Like that's not what I need. I need something else, right? Like, in order to get to the next level, I can communicate fine. It's my other things. I need to get better at this, whatever, confidence, whatever it might be, they feel is adjacent. How do you tie that into communication, or do you?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of thoughts on that. So the first one is around the facets. The way that I like to see this, Dave, is communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. Where one of those balls is fillers, another one of those balls is smiling, another one is eye contact, facial expression, storytelling, the list goes on. But the mistake that most people make is they try and juggle all 18 balls at the same time, right? And that's not the right approach. Because if you try and juggle 18 balls at the same time, what happens? All the balls fall, right? All the balls fall. So the idea is when we think about communication, we need to juggle one ball at a time. That's the secret. So only start with smiling. Get smiling right. Are you smiling consistently? If the answer is no, keep working on that until you got it right. Then pick up the second ball. Then go, okay, what about my eye contact? Is my eye contact good? No? Then keep working on it and smile at the same time and build your way up over time. In terms of the other piece around, is communication important to me? I think the way I see it, it goes back to my definition, which is to achieve a specific outcome for a specific audience. Okay, I'll repeat that again. Achieve a specific outcome for a specific audience. That is the goal of communication, in my opinion. So the question is, how big is your outcome? So if you're not a great communicator or average or above average, but your goal is simply to stay where you are, I have no feedback for you because that's the goal, right? It's to stay there. But if somebody comes up to me and let's say they're a senior software developer and their goal is to be the CEO of a tech company, my only question back to them is, who are the 3 tech CEOs that you admire the most? And they might say something like Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. They might say Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Alphabet. They might say Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce. And I go, what do you think is the difference between their communication skills and yours? And then they see a big gap, because the people who are CEOs, most of them hired coaches, most of them worked on themselves because that's the outcome they wanted. So it's always about aligning what is the dream versus what are your communication goals that are associated to that dream. So that's the way I would see it.
Very good. You don't have a book, but you're it's in the plans. What books do you recommend for somebody like the theoretical person we're talking about?
Yeah, for sure. This is something, a question I get a lot. So here's my first instinct. My first instinctual response is, why do we need to read books? The best way to speak, coincidentally, is to speak. And somebody asks me this all the time in every batch, what book should I read? And I go, okay, let's say you read a book. How many minutes would you spend a week reading that book? And they'll say 30 minutes, 45 minutes. I go, perfect. How about we do the random word exercise 45 times this week instead? And then they start doing this, right? Start tripping a little bit. I was like, that's the point, right? If you want to get better, you got to speak. Yeah. But I do have a book recommendation. I only recommend one that I swear by. But I would recommend you do the random word exercise first and then read the book. Don't do the opposite. The book is called Thirst by Scott Harrison. So Scott Harrison's the CEO of Charity Water, started a nonprofit. He's raised hundreds of millions of dollars to help people gain access to clean water. But the reason I recommend it in the context of my industry is because he's a great example of someone who has applied everything we're talking about in the show to achieve a specific result. So for him, when he gets up on a stage, if he messes up with this communication, people go hungry. Like, people don't have water to drink. So this is what I call high stakes communication. You go up there and you have to deliver, or else a lot of people die, like literally. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. The other piece is storytelling. Scott Harrison's a master at storytelling. The way he tells his story, used to be a nightclub promoter in his early 20s in New York City, get people drunk all the time. That was his life. And then he woke up at 28 and realized that he was the worst human being that he knew. So then he went to an entire transformation. He talks about in the book. Really fascinating storyteller. I think that's one of the main reasons why Charity Water is the golden standard in the nonprofit world. But the reason I like to mention that example, Dave, is because he's in the nonprofit space. That's the hardest space to win in, because the capital incentives don't line up. So if he could do that on a shoestring budget, imagine what we could do with communication. Imagine how we can leverage it to make a substantial impact in the world. That's why I'm a big believer in that book, and I highly recommend it to people who are already working on their communication skills.
Would you say that the thing that's keeping someone from, go to your low level software developer example, someone's keeping them in that position where they're, taking direction, they're doing work day in, day out, but they have this desire to be, strategic, CEO, so forth, leading a crew. What percentage would you say communication is the bridge to that goal? Like what is it? 50%, 70%? What would you say?
I wouldn't say specific number because I'd be just pulling that number out of my you know what, but I would say it's most of it. And I'll tell you why. I think let's break down a different percentage, which is what is required to be an executive. And I think what a lot of senior developers need to realize is most of your job at the top is people management, right? People management, strategic vision, and building relationships. You're not coding anymore. Yeah, sure, you might have some say over the feature set and what gets prioritized in the product pipeline, maybe, but most of your time is really hiring people, developing people, encouraging people to do the work that you used to do. That's what management is. So in the context of that, where does communication play a role in management? Well, if you don't communicate in a way that inspires people to work for you, they're going to leave you, especially in an industry now where the top 1% of technical talent can work anywhere. And I know that from experience because most of my clients are in that space and they're getting offers all the time. It's very easy for them to get a massive increase in salary. All they have to do is interview for all of the FANG companies. They'll get offers for most of them because they're in the top 1% of technical talent. And then we just bid up the highest number. It's a really easy process if you have someone to do it for you. So yeah, like anyone can work for anybody. And that's the point, is a big part of leadership is knowing how to give feedback meetings in a way that inspires people to keep working for you, to keep getting better. It's setting a strategic vision, which requires communication because now you're talking to a bigger room of people. You're not just managing 10 people anymore. When you're in management, you're managing 100 people, 200 people, 300 people, maybe even more if you're working for like an Amazon or something. And then the other piece is, we talked about the strategic vision. We talked about inspiring feedback. Now it's how are you hiring people to work for you? Your network is everything at the executive level. They don't want you to just perform well at the job. They want you to recruit top talent from your network. So if you don't have a great Rolodex, you're not going to add a lot of value as an executive who does have a strong Rolodex. So it's important to keep those things in mind.
Yeah. It sounds like your paradigm and your client base starts off with a presupposed material in a person. Like I guess I'm seeing that there is, a particular person who may have fantastic material in their energy, intellect, etc. And then they need to communicate. Let's just say they're an English speaker. They need to speak Spanish fluently. Like communication is the move from being able to speak about like where's the bathroom and real basic stuff in a language to inspiring and communicating and explaining in this new language. I that's how I look at communication, as I look at it as this journey from como se llama, what's your name, to that kind of some of the things around that. And if you have the right material and the person, again, intellect and so forth, you're going to have a successful outcome when they can speak fluently. But if you have someone who doesn't have that same material, and there's other things they could do to work on that and grow in that, but then you teach them a bunch of things around communication, I feel like the outcome won't be the same because there's other things that need to be kind of worked on. So am I right in saying that you're kind of starting from the supposition that the person sitting in front of you will have a certain material that is just needs that communication layer to be improved?
You got it, Dave. So there's a couple of parts there, right? So one part is the person who is really strong in every area except communication. That person is definitely the ideal person for communication coaching because they're already superstars. They just suck at comms, so they get stuck in their career or they get stuck in their business because they can't inspire people. But the opposite, what I would say, is it depends. So the opposite is someone who's just getting started, who doesn't have great communication skills, but they don't have a strong foundation in general, like for any skill set. So for those people, it really depends. So if they're a student, like just fresh out of uni, No, I wouldn't invest spending thousands of dollars on a communication coach. I don't think that makes sense. I think something more like Toastmasters makes more sense. It's like $100 a year, things like that. But what I would say though is learning communication earlier in the journey is definitely a lot less painful than later in the journey. And the reason is because as you become more senior in a company, as you take on more responsibility, you start to prioritize communication less and less. So, like an entrepreneur making $100,000 a year, it's a lot easier for Elon, let's say, to start working on his comms before he has two like billions of gajillions of companies, right? So, because he's just got a lot more focus that he's doing, there's a lot more things on his plate. So you have to find a balance, right? If you're too early, it might not be worth spending a few thousand on a coach. But if you're also too late, you could still do it. And a lot of them end up doing it, but you're also in a painful process where you have to juggle communication with your family, with everything else. And it becomes a less of a priority, but you still figure it out. But I think it's around finding the balance. So for me in the tech space, I would say level 2 developer for those who are early. So at that point, level 2 developer, you're probably doing 100,000, 120 at that point, but you're still early in your career. That's a good sweet spot, I think, to start thinking about communication if your goal is to be a leader in a company or CEO of a tech company.
Very cool. I'm going to switch a little bit. This is all fascinating. What is there any, particular conversations or connections you had? I think we kind of brushed by this a little bit earlier, unless I missed it. But any particular conversations that you had or individuals that have enabled you to kind of create master talk and kind of get the right client that those founding clients, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely, Dave. I got super lucky with my business partner, if I'm being frank. I wasn't looking to build a business. I was just making videos. And then I met him at a conference, Lewis House's conference in Columbus, Ohio. And he's the one who said, "Hey, you should start a business. You should charge executives a lot of money for your time." And I was like, "I work at IBM, man. I don't need money." He was like, "You could do really well. You can make a lot of impact in the world." And he's the one who gave me my first clients. He's like,
Mm.
"Look, I already charged them for you here. Let's just split the revenue." And I was like, "Okay." And he wrote me a check and he made it come to life. I was like, "Okay, he's not kidding. People actually pay for this, and this actually works." So he was a big component. I mean, we all know it takes a village to create success. I have a ton of people I could shout out.
Yeah.
Like,
Tell me a little bit more about that, though. So was this a guy that you worked with, or you just bumped into him? You sitting at your table at this conference? Tell me about that connection.
yeah, for sure. So it was literally a bump into at a 5 a.m. workout. So how Lewis's conference is structured, he's the host of the School of Greatness podcast. And he has a live event every year. And how it's structured is every morning at 5 a.m. There's like a workout for those who want to go. I hate working out at 5 a.m. I do not wake up at 5 a.m. I wake up at 8. But I wanted to wake up at 5 just to meet people. And Vamsi was the guy next to me. There's only like 50 people there in the morning. And that's how I met him. That's how we got introduced to each other and how we built that rapport, that connection. So that's the piece of how I found him. And then we just built a relationship. So we weren't really like business partners. He wasn't my coach or anything. I guess he just took a liking to me. He liked my videos. And he was just like, "Oh, I always needed like a communication person for my community." And we're both from the same ethnicity. So I guess
Mhm.
he's double my age, by the way. He's like in his mid 40s. And he's been in coaching for 10 years now and in personal development for 10 as well. So yeah, I guess he just bet on me, and I'm glad he did. And it's been a fun ride ever since.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you were working out together, started a conversation, and you had some of the work already put out. You had some videos and stuff like that done. That's fantastic. Great job. That's super cool. You were prepared for that conversation, right? That connection and that kind of acceleration that happened. You were in the right spot, and you'd already done a lot of the work to be prepared for that. Um, has there ever been a time that you were tired, or you were like, I'm not sure if this is kind of going to work out long term, or has it kind of been, you know, constant, consistent upward growth?
Yeah, no, definitely not. I would say the first 6 months of the ideas I thought it was stupid, like real stupid, until Bombsy convinced me otherwise. Bombsy is my business partner. And the reason I bring that up is because we're always the most fragile at the beginning of one's idea. Always. Like now I'm not fragile at all, but at the beginning of the idea, we definitely are. I mean, think about it. Let's paint the picture for people, Dave. I was a 22-year-old kid in my mother's basement making YouTube videos without editing, with just a phone, on communication and public speaking. Who wants to listen to that? Like, it makes no sense. Because my next competitor, well, not competitor, friend, he's a friend, but he has a PhD in communication. He's 50 years old. He has 300,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. Who's like, people are going to listen to him, not me. So yeah, I had a ton of insecurity. I thought it was a dumb idea, but the market proved otherwise. I think that's the key. And my recommendation always is build a support system around you. You don't need a lot of people to bet on you. I think that's what a lot of people get wrong, Dave, is they want everyone to like their idea. And I think that's just a wrong way of approaching it, because by definition, if you're building something new and novel, most people aren't supposed to like the idea. Think about Airbnb. Like when Airbnb started, I mean, Jesus, like every VC firm, every investment firm literally said no to Airbnb, which I'm sure a lot of them are crying about still, right? Down all the way to the bank, right? But that's the point is, yeah, you sleep at strangers' houses. Like, what if people get killed? Like, this is a stupid idea.
Yeah.
Uber, you're gonna put my kid in a stranger's car? Are you absolutely insane? So yeah, most people think every great idea is stupid. Coinbase, Bitcoin, what the hell is that? Like, what are you gonna do? Like trade a virtual currency to each other for money? You ain't taking my money. This isn't making sense. So that's the idea. Is every idea is novel. Every new idea, most people won't believe it. But the key is to find the 5 people who really do. So I'll give you the moment for me. I was 4 months in a master. I was just about to give up, or just like, whatever, make these videos and be done with it. I was making 6 figures at IBM. I didn't need this YouTube channel. I was just doing it for fun. But then one of my friends, she came up to me one day and she was like, "Hey, I love Master Talk." And I was like, "Sure you do." Yeah. And I love bacon. There you go. Like, which I do. Bacon's great. But anyways, and then she goes, "Oh no, like I watched your eye contact video and these are the 3 tips." And I was like, "Oh, you actually did watch the video." She said, "Yeah, your production isn't very good, but your ideas, your content is really good." And that's when it clicked for me. I was like, "Oh, it looks like I am building something that people actually want." And then I kept building on it. And, the market ended up being right. And I ended up getting the right thesis.
Nice. That's great. But can I ask if there's any Achilles heel or particular weaknesses you're comfortable sharing that you've been able to overcome or kind of navigating?
Oh yeah, I can. I mean, there's a long list. Let's go through a couple of them. First one, definitely university professors. So I had this brilliant idea of sharing all of, and by brilliant, I mean I'm being sarcastic. I had a brilliant idea of sharing my videos with university professors, because if you share it with them and they like your stuff, they'll just keep sharing it to every new student. It's free distribution.
Hmm.
And honestly, it wasn't like a business thing. I was just trying to help people, and I still am, obviously. But back then, it was purely a gift. Like, "Hey, university professor, I'm making these videos. When I was in university, I didn't have these resources. You probably sure." All of them spat in my face, Dave.
Hmm.
Like, it's crazy. That like some of them would email me back, and I know they didn't know me, but like they would email me back and just say, "First of all, you don't address me by my first name." Like, I was just like, "Oh my God!" Like, it was insane.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And I was just like, guys, like encourage a 22-year-old kid, even if you don't like their stuff. You should say, "Hey,
Right.
keep going, whatever." And some of them did. I'll give them credit, but most of them did not. So I picked the wrong market. That was a big mistake. And it was a huge hit to my confidence. Because they're university professors. I was like, "Oh, well, if they don't like my stuff." But I think the key is like I was focused on the wrong demo. And I emailed like 50,000 of these people. I was so stubborn. Like, I'm not joking with this 50,000, by the way. I would
It's
come home
amazing. It's impressive.
It's crazy. Honestly, it's not impressive. It's stupid. If I'd done that, because I don't have that stamina anymore, because I was like really stubborn 3 years ago. But like crap, if I'd done that with 50,000 podcasters, I would already have 100,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel.
Mm.
Because people like you're open.
Yeah.
You're open to these ideas. You want guests. You want people to share new ideas. That's
Yeah.
But I didn't know that was a thing back then. Even with someone like me, at the experience I have, I still think I don't know a lot. I'm
Right.
still working because I'm always investing in new coaches, other communication coaches. Like I'm buying their programs because I want to keep getting better so I can show up better for these things. But you're absolutely right. Like it was a sad reality, but I learned from that experience. Right now I know exactly, like now I'm super razor focused on who my target is, who I'm for, who I'm not for, how to scale this thing. But at the beginning, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and for me, a lot of those mistakes were picking the wrong market. It took me a long time to monetize. And honestly, Vomsi didn't come in to like literally give me the clients on the plate. I would have spun in circles for a few years, and I would just stayed in corporate. I'd probably still be working in corporate, because before what I started to do is I was like, oh, I could charge students. Wrong idea, because they're broke. Even if they want to, even if they care about communication, like my first students were university people, but they weren't paying me, but they were taking it really seriously, but they didn't have money. Tech CEOs, I really wanted to work with tech CEOs, but what I realized is all the tech CEOs I had access to didn't have any money either. They wanted the service. They're like, Brenden, I need your help with the pitch. It's such a pain, but I can't pay you.
Yeah, the startup CEOs. Yeah.
Exactly. So it wasn't going to work. But I found an adjustment. So I just kept trying demographic to demographic. Nothing was working until I landed on tech executive. Specifically tech executive whose second language is English. Those people, 100%, they got the money, right? The company generally fronts the cost because our program is like $10 million, right? So it's not like crazy expensive. And they're like a Salesforce, right? They have a program where like, if an executive just wants a program, it's under 5,000, Salesforce just pays for it. Like it's not like, so they'd have to pay for it, and they're stuck. And the reason they have a pain is because when they compare themselves to, not to be like facetious, but like their white counterparts whose first language is English, they might still suck at communication, by the way, babe, but they don't feel the pain of not being promoted. Because like the people understand their accent, whatever, even if they still suck. But the Indian born guy who's like a killer at technical, absolutely killer, is never getting the promotion because they don't know how to play company politics. And that they feel that pain. So they've been in the same role for like 5. They're still making good money. They're making 150, 200K a year, but they know they can make 300. They know they can make 500. So those people, they just stand in line for my programs. Like those people beg me into the programs. And that's when I found product market fit, and I just focus all my attention on those people.
That's awesome. Way to go. Interesting comment you made about the office politics. Is that part of your what do you call it, curriculum?
I do. I don't talk about what I say in that program.
That's valuable right there.
But yes, I give. Let's just put it this way, man. If I'm 25 years old, the only way I have a business is if people refer me, because no one's going to look at my face and go, yeah, this person has all the experience in the world. Somebody has to say, I'll write you the check if you don't pay for the program. That's the type of referrals I get. And it's the only way to keep a business at my current age.
Yeah. So how does that translate into, but the office politics thing, where I totally see that. I totally get that, where I don't like office politics myself. It's probably why I'm particularly curious on this, but definitely see someone who new to the culture, they think in a different language, right? So, they reading the room, or kind of like, it's a different culture. Plus you're reading the room and all those other like red flags and hints and stuff you're going to miss. So you actually, you help people navigate that?
Yes, but it's not something I advertise. So
Okay.
so think of it like this. I'll tell it to you because you're the only person who's asked me about this, by the way. So I'll try and keep this high level so it's not too crazy. So basically, people join for a specific reason, right? When somebody buys, there's a common saying in coaching, right? Give them what they want, right? Sell them what they want, but give them what they need.
Right.
Right? Sell them what they want. Okay, you want this, but then when they're in, you actually give them the medicine they need to be successful. But they just don't know what to ask for because you're the expert, not them. Right. So at the beginning, yeah, absolutely, it's a communication program, and that's what we do, right? We brand a word exercise, executive mastery, teach them how to answer. But once they build up that confidence, yeah, those are just extra weapons I give them in their arsenal to keep adding more value. So one of those examples that I'm happy to share is a mind mapping exercise. So what I have the Indian born executive do, because they just don't know how to make small talk, they don't understand how that game works because they're from a different culture, and not just Indian born. Pretty much every immigrant works. I teach the same thing, except people are American born. So it's a mind map. I have them make a mind map of all the executives in the company, who makes the decisions for hiring, and how you grab coffees with all of them, how do you impress them, what questions to ask, how to filter those conversations. Like I give them literally, and if they're stuck, they literally have a call with me, and I just go, this is what actually you're supposed to say, blah, blah, blah. And I literally tell them what to say. And the same thing with the interview. I tell them what to say in the interviews too. So that way they get their leadership role that they're looking for. And it works all the time. So yeah.
It's good. Well, I hope people hear this and you get some additional clients, because I think
Yeah, sure.
you're doing good work. Yeah,
Thanks,
really,
man.
really cool.
Appreciate you.
What would you say is your greatest strengths? Like what do you think has brought you the furthest?
So I would say out of all of them, my number one trait is definitely focus. Like I have a level of focus that is very unique to my age category. Like think about it. Like I've been in the same skill set for like 6 years, but I'm 25. Like I've been very focused on this. So I'm really good at not getting distracted. I still look at my phone from time to time, but I mean like distract on the bigger picture. Focus has been a big thing for me. A second one is have the humility to know that I don't know everything, or that I know actually very little. So I spend a lot of time investing in mentorship, coaching. I spend a lot of money on Vomsies, my personal coach, in addition to being my business partner. I always like to stay humble. I think that's the second thing. And the third one is I don't rely on emotion. I rely on facts. So I'll give you an example. The way that I look at life, to not make this too morbid, is look, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what you think about the world, how things work. There's three rules to the game. Okay, we're all sitting down this poker table, right? The dealer invites us into the room and our life begins. And there's three rules to the game. The first rule to the game is when you're dealt your hand and you're dealt the chips. Chips represents the number of money that you start with. Some of you are trust fund babies, some of you have nothing, right? You get a couple of chips and you get cards. So the first rule of the game is you can't change the cards that you start with.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cards, right? You got to know how to play the cards. Second thing is the dealer can't tell you how long you get to play the game for. Could be 20 years, could be 100, could be 50. And the third rule to the game is that you're allowed to watch past recordings of other people who sat at the poker table before you. That's it. And the biggest problem that most human beings make, Dave, is that they focus too much on looking at what other people have in their hand, right? Instead of just going, wait a second, you got cards in your hand. Like you should probably look at them, study them, understand them, because it's the only hand you're getting. And those are the people who ultimately succeed. And that would be my my 2 cents.
That's cool. You have a vision for where you're trying to be. Is there anything on the side that you would enjoy doing or developing?
This is like the perfect moment to lie to you, right? Oh yeah, I'm really passionate about the piano. No, honestly, I'm like Gary Vaynerchuk in many ways, in the sense that like this is the game for me. This is what I love to do. Like I'll tell you a funny story on this. There's a reason I still live with my mother, right? There's actually a very clear reason. It's not because of finances. I do much better than I used to in corporate, or that I ever thought I could do in my life. The reason I live in my mom's basement is because I know that if I leave this house, I'll never see her again. And the reason I say that is because I know myself well. I'll never come back to visit her every month. I'll never do that because I always work all the time. That's what I love to do. That's why I just live with her, so that my family life and my work life is integrated. I never have to like say, oh, I need to take out 2 days out of my month and like go to the garden with her. Like I don't have to do that because she just lives with me. I can just see her every day and I don't have any problems. I can just work all day and see her. So I think the key is it's all about going back to understanding the cards, right? Pick the game that you want to play. I'll give you another example. I also live with my sister. Why is that? Because I like to combine incomes. Why bother paying 3 rents when we could spend the next 5 years just all living together, make a ridiculous income together, and save most of it, invest most of it, while other people are just trying to live on their own and be independent, right? So we all make our own decisions. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but what I am saying is understand the cards that you're dealt and focus on what you want to play. Whereas for me, it's like, I really don't care about going on vacations or playing piano. I might play piano once or twice, but like, I don't really care. I just like being on podcasts, talking to people like you, having cool conversations, and building the dream. That's the only thing that excites me, really.
That's great. I love it. I love it. Any tips for folks who are, um, you know, looking to, build this big vision? And as you mentioned, and we've talked about, you don't do things by yourself. You had that great connection at the gym. Um, what, uh, what would you say, even if we're kind of circling back on some things we've already said before, but what would be some tips that you would suggest for folks?
Yeah, I would say for me, Dave, for most people, I always like to give advice to the majority, right? That's the way I always like to play advice. And I think the advice, the most important thing is what I call side hustling comfortably. I hate the stigma around if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to eat cans of worms and like sleep with 5 other guys in a room and you're trying to make it work. Like, that's not what side hustling is if you do it intelligently. Because statistically, most people lose, right, in entrepreneurship. And the reason is simple. The number one trait you need as an entrepreneur is you need to be willing to change always, always, always. And most people aren't willing to change. So most people, by that nature, cannot win in business. Whereas in a corporate job, you don't have to change. Like if you work at Walmart and you're a technical person there, yeah, like it's really inefficient. You could work there, still make a salary. That salary is never guaranteed in business. So what I always like to say is find a nice paying job. Like think of all of your skill set and find something that actually pays money, regardless if you're happy or not doing it. That's my perspective. Because I think money solves most problems in society, in your life, if you know how to optimize against it. But just make sure you're not too miserable, else you might go into depression stuff. Just like find a balance. Like for me, it was being an accountant. I didn't really do it out of passion. I love math. I love numbers, but I didn't really like go, oh my God, like every day I'm going to wake up in the morning and jump up and down and go, oh my God, I get to be an accountant. No, like it makes money. Like let's retire my mother, which is what I did. And then I got a job in technology consulting. Once again, great company. I loved working at IBM, great people. But was I singing Kumbaya every day going to work? No, it's like, it's a job, right? But it pays really well. But what happens is when you start making good money, assuming you're intelligent with your money, which is another story for another day, be intelligent with your money, is what happens is you start to free up time with your mind to think. Because now you're not worried about the next food on the table. You're not worried about, getting the next mortgage paid off. Now you have a lot more room to think. Now the question becomes, what are you going to do with that extra time? Are you going to waste it like most people on Netflix? Or are you going to use the time that you just bought yourself back to actually reflect on what you want to do in life? And that's what I did when I worked at IBM. Is when I got my extra time back, I would spend weeknights and weekends really thinking about what I wanted to do in life. Going to conferences like Lewis's, taking vacation days, not to go to Cuba, but to go to like all of these conferences to really mastermind, to meet other people. That's what I want to do. And then the idea for Mastercard came to life and I was able to exit corporate and do this full time. Most people aren't willing to do what I just said, Dave. So that would be my advice, is find a nice high paying job. Live with your parents if you can. You can't always, but try and keep your expenses low so that you have more time to think. And you can't properly think if you're worried about the bills. So spend that time to think and you'll find the answers you're looking for.
That's good stuff. Good advice. Love it, man. Thanks so much for joining me and for sharing your story and your advice. It's great stuff, man. Valuable. I hope people hear this and I hope people reach out to you. How would people reach out to you and where would they find resources from you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure, brother. Great conversation. So there's 2 ways to keep in touch. One is YouTube. Go to Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on communication and public speaking. And then the second way is for those who are interested in coaching. You can come attend one of my free interactive live trainings over Zoom. So I do a free coaching session every few weeks for a couple of people on Zoom. So you can register for that at rockstarcommunicator.com.
Cool. I'll put all the notes too.